the kitchen today, someplace we haven't been in quite a long time. It is November 3rd, 2024. Happy Sunday. We're going to do a little experiment with a single strain yogurt, and we're going to use kefir as our control substance. And you can see here that the bacteria strains that are good for your gut in common yogurt, just regular everyday yogurt, there's 13 of them usually, sometimes a lot less. And the bacteria strains in common to milk in kefir grains are a whole lot more. Some are the same ones that you find in common yogurt, but there are 23 different gut bacteria types, but no Lactobacillus reuteri. This single strain cultivated milk product is not technically a yogurt. It's a cultivated milk product. And so we're going to look at what the developer of this cultivated milk product says, why he says what he says. We're going to look at the process to make this Lactobacillus reuteri heavy cultivated milk and try and determine whether you should care or not care, and are there benefits? Let's find out. Let's also keep in mind that standard yogurt found in the grocery store only has Lactobacillus and Streptococcus bacteria strains, and some may add Bifidobacterium bifidum and Lactobacillus acidophilus, but no L. reuteri. And so you're only getting 4 of the potential 13 beneficial bacteria in commercial yogurt, except Greek style, which often has more beneficial culture strains. Now, this is what the creator of this single culture milk product claims are the benefits. And honestly, they appeal to all the things that people complain about as a result of modern diet. However, this is very subjective. Some people report better sleep, some don't. And that's true of the various other suggested benefits from this single culture milk product. And I have to add one more caveat. The person who developed this culture has access to a scientific lab and is able to track the various bacteria strains in his culture, and we do not. And with most fermentation products, regardless of whether it's kombucha or kefir or yogurt or this particular culture strain, wild things can happen. We don't have sterile conditions, as does the creator of this product, but we do the best we can, and for the most part, there is benefit to eating cultured food because it replenishes your good gut bacteria, which is beneficial according to medical sources that say better gut health, better health all around, and I'm going to leave it at that. So what kind of milk should we be using to make this single culture milk product? Well, the developer uses straight half and half. And as we have found out with the fat-heavy keto type diets, flooding your body with fat might not be the best way to go. And in recognition of that, some people are using a mixture of half and half and whole milk, which is better because you get less milk fat. But I'm going to tell you that you can use regular whole milk if you choose. If you're conscious of your artery health and need to stick to a heart-healthy diet, whole milk is perfectly fine. Does this cultured milk product have to be ultra-pasteurized? And the answer is no. What ultra-pasteurization does is heat the milk to 161 at the minimum and keep it there for 15 to 20 seconds. all the way up to 200 degrees, which in a home kitchen, especially if you're using an electric stove, puts you right at the danger zone for scalding your milk and wasting your money. So I have this to say. If you buy ultra-pasteurized milk products to do this, either the Kefir or the L. reuteri strain single culture milk product, you can open your milk or your half and half and pour it straight into your clean jar. I use mason jars, as do most people who ferment, but use an old spaghetti sauce jar that you still have the lid for if that's what you have on hand. And as an aside, I am not recommending either one of these products by company name. It's what was on the shelf in my grocery store, and the milk is something that almost everybody has access to from that company. However, straight pasteurization is all you need. You do not have to go to the extra expense of using ultra pasteurized products, nor do you have to heat those products. You don't have to heat your cream or your whole milk, regardless of brand. Now, having said that, I know there are some people out there that get real nervous if they're not experienced with culturing and fermenting. So I'll walk you through the process, even though don't need to do the first step. Heat 1 liter of milk to 71 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit and hold it there for 15 seconds. Turn the heat off, let it cool down to 23 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 73 to 77 Fahrenheit. Add 1 sachet, this is for Kefir, add 1 sachet, and I used freeze-dried this time, and stir until completely dissolved. Pour the mixture into a clean container. Close the lid. Don't refon the cap. Just close it. Let it stand at room temperature until kefir and curds form. And that's almost 24 hours. I can tell you that you will get something like the next shot before 24 hours are up if you are in a warm house, and by warm I mean above 72 degrees. Strain the kefir grains and place those kefir grains in fresh milk. On the first go around, the second go around, maybe even the third go around, you will not be able to see these kefir grains because they're going to be very small. Nevertheless, strain them through a fine mesh strainer, either stainless steel or plastic. Put the grains into a clean, fresh bottle or jar to restart the process, and repeat that 3 and 4 for as long as you want to keep your culture alive. However, once it's cultured, you need to drink it within 7 days because the longer it cultures, the more sour it is. If you want to keep relatively sweet kefir, then you need to be drinking it every day. The jar on the left is my kefir, and after 12 hours, you can see at the bottom the cultured product has separated from the whey, and there is nothing wrong with this. Just shake it up a little bit, make sure your cap is on tight enough so you don't have milk flying everywhere. Shake it up and then strain it, as I said just previously. I will tell you this. Kefir likes to ferment at a lower temperature than this L. reuteri cultured milk. Either one separating is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So if you see it happen, it's fine. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. Now, when you strain out your kefir grains, if you have used a dehydrated product like I did, you're going to want to strain that through the fine mesh sieve, as I just said, and you will probably not see any grains. So what I suggest is you strain half of it. So that would be half liter, which is, 2 cups or something. Put that aside as your drink for the day, and then use the rest that's gotten thicker and kind of is having a tough time getting through the strainer, use that whole thing as your starter culture for the next round. Because until your kefir grains grow and multiply, you're not going to be able to see them. So let's move on to the reuteri process, and it's a little bit different. Clockwise, you're going to need some inulin powder. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber. I used 3 tablespoons. You can use 2 for a quart, but I wouldn't go over 3 to 4 for 1 quart. Mine is a little rich in that I use 3 tablespoons, and that's what you see in the little glass jar. Next to it, going clockwise, is a mortar and pestle, and next to that is a little bottle of the dried L-reuteri in tablet form, and you'll need 10 tablets, which you're going to crush up as fine as you can in your little mortar and pestle. If you don't have that, get a heavy-duty freezer bag and a rolling pin or a pop bottle and crush it up that way. Do be careful that you don't use a hammer and like slam it. Do be careful that you don't poke holes in your bag when you first start to crush these tablets. It only takes a minute or two to crush them in a mortar and pestle, and it doesn't take much more time with a rolling pin and a plastic bag. And then behind that is my, I used half and half, and half milk. The same milk that you saw in the beginning, I used the same 2 products for both of these. Although I would not normally, as I've said, use half and half at all. These are the steps to create this L-reuteri cultured milk product. And all the people who are strict rule followers will tell you to heat the milk to a ridiculous near scalding point. I hope I've convinced you that it's not necessary, but if I haven't convinced you, or, if you're nervous, then I've just sort of made those steps very light font, but they're still there. So you're going to want to add 10 crushed tablets and stir that into your milk, whether it's straight half and half or whole milk or a combination thereof. And then you're going to add your inulin and stir. And let me tell you something about inulin. It does not easily incorporate into this like you might think it would. It doesn't. It takes a little stirring, and if you want to shortcut it a little bit, put on a lid and, tighten that lid so you can shake the milk product, and it will help incorporate the inulin. So number 3, where it says pour the mixture into a clean container, your fermenting jar is your clean container, and so that step is out of order. So the next step is to cover it with a coffee filter, or you can put a solid lid on it, but don't crank it down. Again, these are fermenting products. They expel CO2 gas, so you don't want to reef on that cover or even finger tighten it like you would for canning. You want it just to catch so that the air exchange, whatever little tiny bit there is minimal. And now this is where it gets different. L-reuteri likes body temperature. 98.6 is common average body temperature. Some people run at 97.2, like yours truly. Or some people run a degree or 2 higher. Body temperature is fine. However, you have to maintain that temperature for 36 hours. So you can't decant this the next day like you can with our control experiment with kefir. There are a variety of ways of doing this. A seed heating mat or a fermenting mat that you wrap around a glass jar, or what I do, you may or may not have the ability to do. I have a big sort of empty cupboard in my kitchen underneath my counter that I keep just for sourdough bread and kombucha and other kinds of fermenting. However, in this case, don't ferment anything else in the same closed space as you're fermenting this reuteri, because it can get contaminated with your other ferment. So I have this big cupboard. I stick my, I have a glass mixer jar or mixer bowl. I put a silicone cover, the kind that actually wraps down around the rim of the bowl. And I turn my dehydrator on, because I have one of those little round dehydrators. And you have to fool around with the temperature setting. You'll need a thermometer to be able to tell when your culture is at between 98.6 and 104 or 5. Don't go over 105. Some people say do it at 106 and don't go over 106. I'm giving you the safe parameters that will get the job done, so that if you don't have a dehydrator that you can regulate the temperature with, you have other options. Some people have reported success sticking this jar in the oven with just the oven light on, although running your oven light for 36 hours doesn't seem very efficient to me. But you're going to have to monitor the temperature, and how you do that is totally up to you, including an oven thermometer. There are about 9 or at least 8 ways of skinning the cat, so to speak. This is my second Kefir strain, and I'm showing you this shot just to show you the little strainer sitting in a regular canning jar funnel. There are no colonies of Kefir grains yet, but I can see little specks that look kind of fat. They're about the size of a pinhead. If you stuck around this long, I should apologize for not including video, but my kitchen is so small that I cannot balance where the camera is and where all the things that I'm doing are. So it's still shots only. Now let's look at 36 hours later. What did our first batch, first round of culturing produce? We can see that we have a very well congealed cultured milk product, and if you look under the spoon down into the bowl, you can see there's a fair amount of whey there. Nothing wrong with that at all. This culture, we could call it a baby culture. If we compare it to using freeze-dried Kefir grains, it would be no different than the first round of making kefir from freeze-dried Kefir grains. The culture is not robust yet. However, the people who say they don't like this first round, and many people don't use the first round, they have a hard time saying why. Either the taste isn't quite what they thought it would be, it's not creamy or milky enough, or some have said they don't like the texture. Well, if your culture comes out in this solid clump, but it's grainy, like very tiny cottage cheese curds, then I could understand why you wouldn't like it. And all you need to do, in truth, is take 2 tablespoons of that congealed culture, put it in a clean glass jar, put your milk in, and 2 tablespoons of inulin, put it back in wherever your heat source is, and let it run for another 36 hours. Now you'll notice that my amount of milk that I put in with my congealed 2 tablespoons of culture from the first batch is a lot less. I'm suggesting you stick to the recipe and use another quart of milk, whether it's half and half, whole milk, or a combination thereof. I am making less for my own purposes because I want to see if this will go any faster if I use less milk in the 36-hour period to grow my second round of culture. Hi, future editing me here. Before we hit the next shot, I want to show you what happened after I separated my first 36-hour batch. This is that little drinking mason jar that was in the background of that previous shot, and it's just where I dumped all the whey out of my L. reuteri first round culture. And 20 hours later, yes, I left it on the counter uncovered, exposed to, all kinds of madness. And as you can see, if you look closely on the bottom of that jar, as well as up the right side towards the handle, the culture continued to grow. And we'll have more on that later. Now, this is what you should have, according to the experts, at the end of the second 36 rounds. And full disclosure, this is not my shot. This is a random shot that I took off of Google Images. But you can see it is supposed to, according to those much more experienced than I, with this culture, look like very thick, almost whipped cream. I'll tell you up front, I don't think mine is going to look this way. Before we see how mine turned out, let's see how our third round of Kefir turned out. You can see that there's very little visible whey, and there is some on the top and very little on the bottom. Since all we're doing in this clip is pouring out the Kefir to strain the grains, you're just barely going to get a view, but a very close-up view, of the Kefir being strained. And I can tell you that when you see very little whey, it means one of two things. It either means that the whole milk culture has been chewed up, eaten up by the Kefir grains, or it means it's underdone. And in my case, it is not fully processed because my house has been much cooler for the last 24 hours than it was when we first started this, where my house was uncomfortably hot due to running the dehydrator at temperature for the L. reuteri. This third go around for our Kefir culture is much, much thicker than yesterday's culture. And if you just look on this blue silicone mixing stick that I have, you'll be able to see little bumps that are cultures. There they are. They are culture clusters forming. So these little grains kind of group together and form little clusters. Eventually, those things will look like mini cauliflower florets when the grains have clumped together and are mature. Hours later, how did it go? Well, it looks very congealed, and you can see as I'm tipping it, there's just a little bit of whey right where my finger is. So it's at the perfect time to decant and start over again. Whenever you see whey, as I've said before, and I'll stand on this hill, whenever you see whey, it's not a bad thing. You can mix it right back in and it will be fine. Whey is an indication that your culture is finished processing all the milk properties, the milk sugars and lactic acid and that kind of stuff. So here I am, I'm taking this out just so you can see the consistency. There's a nice clean break there, like you would expect to see the way the beginning of processed cheese holds together. But what I'm going to do here is dump it all out, and I resisted the temptation to speed this up because I want you to see it in real time. So the first thing I'm going to do is dump some into the strainer so you can see how much whey there is this time. It's not that high peak, stiff whipping cream consistency. It's very thick yogurt-like consistency. But again, let's remember, this is not yogurt. It's cultured milk. This total time to decant and strain out a little bit of whey so you could see it, and then put it back in a clean bottle and start the process over, took 5 minutes and 33 seconds. Now, there are two spots where I cut some blank time where all you were doing is looking at jars and bowls. And that's because I had to grab a paper towel to wipe the rim off, which you'll see in a second. And the other time was to open the fridge and get some milk. I took out the ultra-pasteurized product that we started this experiment with just to get rid of it. And there was just enough to do a third round of this L. reuteri cultured milk. So the one thing that you will not see me do on camera is put in 2 tablespoons of Inulin powder. You really don't need it at this point because the cultures are eating milk products. But since I am lowering the temperature, there you can just see how little whey has strained out in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. As I was saying, you don't really need the inulin at this point, but I am lowering the temperature to 90 degrees for this third round. And I satisfied myself that if I used less milk, that I would be able to feed the culture and yet not end up with more culture than I need. So why did I say that I was pretty sure my culture was not going to look like the whipped cream culture? Well, number one, I only used half and half and half milk the first time around. After that, I just used milk and did not add any more half and half. What I believe is that the reason people are using half and half or telling other people to use half and half is because the water content in half and half is much lower than the water content of whole milk. 2% milk has more water content than whole milk. And I believe that in order to get that creamy, high peak scoop, the water or the fat from milk has been displaced. And so you have less water and more fat, and I don't want that. For my third round of L. reuteri cultured milk, I am lowering the temperature to 90 degrees, and that's why I put 2 tablespoons extra in my quart jar of my cultured L. reuteri. So after 4 days of shooting and editing and creating graphics and doing all this jazz, what am I going to do with my L. reuteri since I already used kefir in my smoothie? Well, that L. reuteri is going into the strained kefir for my daily smoothie, and I'll probably use 1 heaping tablespoon just like what you see on the screen. You see, the same claims that we saw in the beginning of this video about better health all around can also be made of almost all cultured foods. It was a fun experiment. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you try one or both of them and let me know what you think in comments. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. See you real soon.